Good morning, friends. Here it's February 27th, 2018. This is the final session in part one here, okay? Which is the prolegomena, the framework, the foundation, the new way of thinking that I'm trying to help you see. I want to recapitulate a number of points that I've been trying to make here and kind of bring it together. I want to focus it as much as possible, because what I'm really trying to do is help you see that it's not a question of right or wrong. You know, once you believed in this God, now you believe in this God. Now you used to think this way. It's much, much greater than that, and that you can take the best of all the pieces of your life's journey and your faith journey and put them together. The first thing I tried to start off with was the distinction between the two ways of reading the Bible, the academy and the church. It's really a question of monovocality and multivocality. If you believe the Bible's the Word of God, then you've got this rather monovocal view of it. If you don't believe the Bible's the Word of God, you've also got a monovocal view of it. You see what I'm saying? And so this is how we've ended up in Protestantism, and with liberalism on the one side and fundamentalism and evangelicalism on the other side, this belief that either the Bible is God's word or it isn't God's word. And then you get the mushy views in the middle. The mushy views all try to find revelation somewhere in the Bible, whether it's, I don't know, social justice or right-wing politics, you name it. You can find your politics in the Bible. Whatever your politics are, they're in the Bible, okay? They're already there. In other words, there's nothing new under the sun here, okay? So let's just say that. And what happens is people are looking, trying to figure out, you know, where God speaks and how God speaks. And because they utterly fail to start at the right place, which is writ all over the New Testament, as we've said this before, the cross of Christ, because they don't start there. They get everything wrong. One of the arguments I'll come back to, but in my PhD thesis, the conclusion is all human knowledge, whether theological or anthropological, needs to come from the victim. And that's the only true starting place for authentic knowledge, because it speaks, particularly because of the impact of the gospel, we have to speak the truth about the victim and our victimizing. We have to speak the truth about this. And when we do that, we find that we're forgiven by the Father. But you don't see that being played out in Protestantism in America right now. Instead, all you've got are people appealing to the Bible as some sort of authority for their particular political and social agendas all over the spectrum. We exist in multivocality. We are the symbolic species. We're the species that symbolizes. And the symbols become metaphors, and when they become narrative symbols, they're myths. This is Paul Ricoeur. But hermeneutically, we act as if life meaning was monovocal. I mean, we recognize multivocality everywhere, plurality of voices, diversity, you know, people have their own way of saying things and thinking things and doing things and how different cultures are. I mean, we got the whole multivocality thing down. I mean, that's just kind of pressed down from the academy and the Enlightenment right down to the modern time. But we live as though life was monovocal, and we're looking for this meaning. Here's the thing. Perspective is reality, but reality is not perspective. Let me try and parse this a bit. Your perspective is your reality, because your perspective, you filter information in and filter information out, and that's your perspective. And your perspective is your reality. Okay, so you've got information, you've chosen to filter in information that's not there. It doesn't fit, and so it's just not there. And that's your perspective. That doesn't mean it's reality, capital R. Reality is not perspective. Okay? Your perspective is only ever your perspective. Paul says it this way: we see through a glass dimly. Yes, we see through it, but it's not clear. You have to go back to what ancient glass was like, people. It ain't like the stuff on your house now that you can see through and polish up real nice and, walk into if you're not careful, like I've done with my sliding glass doors here. No, it was enough to let light through and you could see out, but it was not clear. It's the same with our perspective, okay? What the gospel's doing, this is what the gospel's doing, it's taking that glass and clearing it up so that eventually you are looking through a clear mirror, through a clear lens, through a clear window, as it were. But your perspective is your reality. And you need to acknowledge that right off the bat, because this is huge. It's going to be absolutely huge when it comes to worship. Okay? I'll get to that in a second. Third, the only singular, unique voice in human history, the only voice that speaks anything different or utterly otherworldly, is the voice of Christ on the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That is the unique, singular point of revelation. The gods don't do this. Humans don't do this. This is the breaking down of everything that grounds human sacred violence. It's the absolute deconstruction of it, this narrative of this execution of this Jew from Galilee and his response as his imitation of the one he called Abba. And the Abba vindicates that response in raising him from the dead and coming back with the word Shalom. This is the only singular, unique voice, and that's why everything has to begin here. And the deconstruction of everything has to begin here. And you can sit and deconstruct intellectually all you want and philosophically all you want, okay? And you can show, bad logic and bad arguments and blah, 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 blah. I know you can do all of that, and you still ended up with nothing. I mean, at the end of the day, you've just shown that others don't have anything either, But with this particular entry point, this data point, we now can make sense of everything, all life, because this is the new perspective. It is first learning to look at the crucified Christ as the one you crucified, I crucified, we crucified. And then, over time, to learn to look out from the cross through the eyes of the forgiving victim. That's a shift that takes place. You can't just jump to that. You have to first stand on the ground crucifying him. Were you there? Yeah. And the proof of the pudding is we all do it. This is the beauty of the kind of the Adam Christ typology thing, is that in Adam we all sacrifice. All of us. We've done it all our lives. It's all we know. We're in it. We're beyond it, it's beyond us, I should say. We live in it. We sacrifice. And we are now called to be that unique species, the ecclesia, the church, that new species that forgives. Boom. And brings forgiveness to the world. So all theological thinking begins with the cross of Christ and circles back to it time and again in the Eucharist. And you cannot say enough good things about the ritual of the Eucharist in the church. You really can't. What you can say is all kinds of negative stuff about the way it has been misused, misunderstood, misappropriated, misrepresented, and everything else, but you cannot underestimate its significance or its power. We've talked about themes related to temple and sacrifice and the importance of recognizing that right from the get-go, the Bible's just not about violence in general, but about a very specific type of violence, sacred violence. That is the process of turning violence into religion and culture. What happens in the establishing of and maintaining of religions and cultures on this mechanism. The Bible's about this big picture thing, people. this deep structure thing, okay? It's not dealing with little aches and pains and, oh, I've got a little theological acne here. No, it's attacking right at the core of the disease. That's what the Bible is doing, and that's what makes it so powerful. And that's why recognizing these themes right up front of a temple and altar and sacrifice and atonement and the death of Jesus, oh, right there, it's right there. And when your liberals tell you, oh, the death of Jesus, really wasn't around, the Apostle Paul made it all up into this Christ myth thing, they're so full of shit it isn't funny. They have the most bizarre view of the development of the early church, and this is a real problem. A lot of New Testament scholars have never taken the time to work out their own framework of the development of early apostolic church history. They haven't taken that time. They're lazy. And then they come spew all these things, Paul the myth maker and, bop, and this and that. And boom, Jesus, the Q sayings teacher, the wisdom professor in his tweed jacket. It's all bullshit, people. You got to get this. The academy doesn't give you the true Jesus, okay? Okay, I'm not saying the church does, but the academy doesn't. There's pieces here at play. We've talked about this: the textual Jesus, the risen Jesus, the Jesus of tradition, and I forget the fourth one already. Jesus of experience, Christus Praesens. We've talked about this. Okay, and the importance of having all four together, because with all four together, you can establish a harmonic. You can begin to recognize that the Jesus you're learning about in historical Jesus, reason, the Jesus you're learning about as you watch the gospel writers interpret his life, the textual Jesus, the Jesus you're learning about from church history, how the great creeds and the fathers and mothers understood Jesus, early on, and as they're framing the Christian faith tradition, and then the Christus Praesens, Jesus in your own life, personally, or also in Christian community. When when there's a harmonic between them, and things are so clear that you recognize Jesus when you see this, this is Jesus. This is the true and living Jesus, the risen Lord, the Son of the Abba. There are two very distinct modes of knowing. The first is reason, and the second is faith. And people, since the Enlightenment, we've held them at odds, maybe even before. You go back to the Greek philosophers. Faith is confused when it is understood as trust in that which one can rationally understand. Let me say that again. Faith is confused when it is understood as trust in that which one can rationally understand. If you're a fundamentalist, you've got to be able to rationally understand all the arguments for and against and all the apologetics, and you trust because somebody's worked all this out and you've just got to learn it. Same in liberalism. You've thrown away everything and you're only going to believe that which makes rational sense to you. That's not faith. Faith doesn't trust in reason. Now hear me here. I didn't say faith was irrational. I said faith doesn't trust in reason. In 1931, Barth published his little Anselm book on Anselm's Proslogion, and he exegeted that medieval text in order to demonstrate that faith has its own mode of knowing and understanding. Fides quaerens intellectum. Faith seeking understanding. Now, that's different than intellectus quaerens fidem. Intellect seeking faith. If you must understand something rationally, completely, empirically, logically, in order to trust God, you are a Gnostic. That's what Gnosticism is. I am saved by right knowledge. Whether it's fundamentalist knowledge that God's word is God's word, or whether it's liberal knowledge of empirical scientific methodology, it doesn't matter. I'm saved because of what I know. That is not Christian faith. Christian faith doesn't even begin there. It begins from the one place where one would look and say God is not, and that's the cross. It's the trust of the Son, the fidelity of the Son to the Father at that moment to forgive the enemies, because that's what the Father would do. That's what the Father does. The Son is imitating the Father. That's the beginning point. Faith, grounded in reason, is Gnosticism. When you come across the word faith in the New Testament, pistis, the infinitive is pistuein, pistuo is the verb. When you come across this term, please translate it as trust or fidelity, trustworthiness or faithfulness. The word faith in English is absolutely useless. It's absolutely useless, particularly in Bible translations, because we all are going to read this as a Gnostic assertion, faith in that which we can make rational sense of. All Christians do this. They already come to the Bible as Gnostics, and they read their Gnosticism into faith, and then they read it right back out again. No, faith, trust, trusting in the trustworthiness of God. You see, trust is the medium of access beyond fleshly dimensions, beyond the dimension of the ego, consciousness, the self, life, rationality, the world as we know it, the voices in our head, the identity that we have, all that, all that. Trust is the medium of access beyond these dimensions. I'll give you a very simple example. Many of you will know what I say that you have experienced listening to your intuition. And so you all of a sudden know something, and it doesn't make sense how you would know it, that you know it, but you know it, and you follow it, and it leads to a benefit. And then some of you have experiences where the intuition told you one thing and you didn't follow it, and it led to a bane. Some of you have had the experience of thinking of somebody out of the blue that is not somebody you would normally think of. And then the phone rings and it's them. You've had these experiences, okay? These are just teeny small surface type things of what's really going on underneath with regard to what humans call intuition generally. It's actually multifold. But it includes the discernment of voices. And that includes discerning the voices in your head. How to recognize all the cultural voices and shut those stations down. Just shut them down. Boom. Blanket them. Cover them up. Tinfoil them. Whatever you got to do, you know. How to listen to the voice of the Father. All this is about trust. It's the life of discipleship. This is precisely where all of the rubber meets the road, is right here. You see, this is not just an intellectual exercise we're doing. We are bearers of light and revelation to the world, and we are only bearing light and revelation to the world when we are acting like Jesus, when he is acting his life in us, when we are thinking like he thinks and knowing as he knows, and we are known by him and loved and cared for. You know, there's this great hymn in Colossians 1:15 through 20. Go read it. Colossians 1:15 through 20. And it talks about the Christ in and of creation. That is the manifest beauty of Jesus in all of creation. Things seen and unseen. There are a lot of things you cannot see with these eyes. And you can't see them with the eyes here either. Okay? can't think to him. It takes another kind of set of eyes to see. And the Colossians hymn is expressing this. That Christ is the Lord of all that is seen and unseen, these incredible worlds of creation that we have, and larger than the physical manifest universe that we know. And this brings us now to what I would call the Jesus of experience, or the Christus presens. So, we've talked about the historical Jesus a fair amount, how the gospel writers understood Jesus, the textual Jesus, the historical Jesus, how the churches understood Jesus, the Jesus of tradition. Now I want to talk about the Christus presens, the Jesus of your experience and my experience. None of us chooses to follow a false Christ, but we have. Jesus is in the business, if we are open to him, of moving us away from these false Christs to himself. And he's gentle as he does this. Sometimes it feels hard as all get out, but I'm sure from his perspective, he's quite gentle. The thing is, you take the knowledge you have from the historical Jesus, you take the knowledge you have from the Jesus of church history, you take the knowledge you have from how you understand the gospel writers hearing Jesus' story. You have all this Jesus knowledge, right? There's some beautiful pieces in this Jesus knowledge of yours, isn't there? As you're learning to interpret the life of Christ non-sacrificially, you're learning to see beautiful things about Jesus' teachings about the Father's reign and the healing and life and the beauty and awe of just being alive, just being able to be a child of the Father in this world. You can recognize that in Jesus. And this is what I prayed for a long time. I said, Lord, I can see you as so beautiful, but I know you're much more beautiful than that. I can see you as extraordinary, but I can not even begin to imagine how extraordinary you are. And I just give you thanks for what I know about you now. And I've lived there. Oh, and that my confidence in knowing Jesus has grown over the years. And in being known by him, or at least feeling that I'm so much more. Every little thought, mind, intention, everything is he's just right there. So here's the deal. You can go read a book on physics, and you can read 100 books and 1,000 books and 10,000 books on physics, and you can make yourself the most extraordinary physicist in the world. Just because you did it. And you learned science and scientific methodology, and you were the next Stephen Hawking. You can't do Christianity that way. You can't read a book on Jesus, 100 books on Jesus, 1,000 books on Jesus, 1,000,000 books on Jesus, can't and then say you know him. It is a requirement of Christian faith. I'll use the word in a positive way in terms of Christian faith tradition. It is a requirement of the Christian faith tradition that in order to know Jesus, you follow him. Hunt Stank, the Anabaptist, said, only those who follow Jesus know him, and only those who know him follow him. Something to that effect. Let's flip them. But the reality is, this fourth component, the present Christ, the choice to follow Jesus, the choice to in a sense, imitate him, let him live his life in you, share in all these conversations with him. All of this requires personal commitment. And this is where, the evangelicals have it right. I'm not quite so sure that I'm really a fan of infant baptism and all of that, because I don't necessarily see original sin, the way that the Roman Catholic Church did or does. But it is a sine qua non that in order to know Jesus, you have to follow him. You have to take that risk. You have to leave everything behind. You have to choose to follow. And that's because the gospel's a lived epistemology. It's a lived epistemology. You are living out how you think. Okay, you're living it out. How you think comes from this cross, and you are living that out. This is the path of discipleship. You're not just thinking something and living it out. You're living out how you are thinking. In the same way, the gospel's a lived hermeneutic. Jesus' life is lived in you. He's interpreting himself through you. Okay, you are an interpretation of him. And as an interpretation of him, you become this revelation, this light, this life. This is his faithfulness to us, to manifest himself in us and through us, to change us, to transform us into his image. And this is part of the beauty, I guess, of growing older, is that you can begin to see that. But this whole thing only comes from the lens, through the perspective of being the forgiving victim, of recognizing this is the entry point into human knowledge. This is the entry point into knowing. It's this trusting character of Jesus, trusting his Father, that this is not the end. Death will not have the last word in his life. His Father will see to it. And he trusts his Father more than he fears death. He trusts his Father and his Father's power more than he fears death and annihilation. And he lets go to telestai. The creation is finished. Now perfection has come, if you want to use that term. Our problem is that we only view life, space, time, history, knowledge, and wisdom from the perspective of the sacrificial victim, either the victim of myth, where we are the persecutors and we cover up our victims, or we're the victims and we agree with the persecuting community, or the blood of Abel. And then most of Christianity right now, Protestantism all over in America, liberal, conservative, progressive, fundamentalist, it doesn't matter, is just speaking the blood of Abel. From, it's this vengeance, retaliation, economies of exchange, entitlement. You owe me this, you owe me that. I want this, I want that. The Constitution provides this, God provides that. Whole lock, stock, and barrel here in America. Fundamentalist, liberal, evangelical, progressive, you name it. And it's a great big battle for the Bible by people that don't deserve it. That's the only. They only know the blood of Abel, man. They don't know the blood of Jesus. They really don't. There aren't that many Christians in America. There really aren't. I need you to see this. They're few and far between. This whole business of this epistemology, this lived way of thinking in forgiveness and in trust, and this is the key, because I'm going to come back to this business of this multivocality. That is, there is a place for reason. There's a place for trust. And they're not arch enemies, and they're not equals, and they're not rivals, and they're not dualistically separated, and they're not the same thing. But they are in this beautiful, beautiful relationship. Okay? This is what you have got to get grips on. Here's the deal. Again, you don't trust in your theology. But your theology, the intellectual work you do, the hard questions you ask, the things you ponder and try to parse out, that whole process is absolutely essential for this, for the ego. The ego has to do this. It has to do this. But it is the larger self that's going to be involved in the faith journey. Okay? Now, the old school model was mind and heart. Okay? I don't really like that model because it has a dualism built in, I don't like that model. But I do want to recognize something in that model, and that's that there is more to the Christian life than what happens here. Far more. So down here, I use the down here, the viscera. I think not just the heart, but the organs. There's one organ here. Well, there's a bunch, but big one, and a bunch of organs here. It's these other organs we want to bring into play, so to speak, with trust. How does it happen? It's really simple. It involves a process. You journey with Jesus. You listen, you ponder, you think, you meditate, you pray, you cogitate, you relax. There's many ways, but it's a journey of these movements, and you discern how you are mimetically acquisitive, where you're seeking to grasp, and you learn to let go of those things. It's that process of just learning to let go, let go, let go, let go, and just let go. It's all it is. It's a lifetime of learning to let go. And in the same time, when you've let go, you're now, your hands are open to receive. The other metaphor is, of course, on a cross, your hands are open. You can't grasp anything. We do this by renouncing economies of exchange as we see them in ourselves and in relation to others. And so what that simply means for me is when I find myself in relationship to another where I'm doing something because I want something, I know at that particular point I am not listening to Jesus. I either need to reframe or redo my intention, my heart. I need to begin to ask about my selfish motives. I really have to search. And I can still do the right thing, but I have to deal with what's going on inside so that it becomes in line with Jesus. So it becomes a grace thing rather than an economy of exchange. The opposite of an economy of exchange is grace, charis. We say it's unmerited favor. What does that mean? It means it's favor outside of the context of an economy of exchange. Do ut des, I give to get. So the first thing we need to do in this whole business is recognize Jesus' body. That is Jesus' life, his story. This is the doctrine of the incarnation. This is all John chapter 2 in the temple is trying to get at. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. Well, how can you do that? It took Herod 46 years to build it. We're still building it. And the writer has to give you this little parenthesis. He spoke of his body, the temple of his body. Jesus is the temple of God. Jesus is where the Father dwells. We know this. This is Christian theology. This is temple theology. Jesus is where the Father dwells. You have to start there. You don't start there, you're not going to get anywhere. You want to do this whole, well, God is in everybody thing? Well, fine. Good luck. Tell me how that all works in the end. You want to do this God is nowhere thing? Yeah, great. Join all the others in the desert of criticism, man. Have fun. Tell me how that works. Or you can recognize the Father in Jesus of Nazareth and recognize that pivotal character, that essential revelatory, reconciliatory character is the heart of what changes everything. Entering the temple, if Jesus' body is the temple, and Paul's going to talk about dwelling in his body, we as his body, then the resolution of conflicts is essential to dwelling in the temple. Hard for me. I hate conflict resolution with a passion because I want to be right. And I just have to let it go and go make amends. And this is key. Jesus talks about it in the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't he? If there was less effort spent on asserting identity politics and more thought given to this type of Christian life, I think Christianity would be quite different in this country. There's the creation as the temple. We've seen that in Genesis 1. John Walton, The Lost World of Genesis 1, Margaret Barker and others. We've talked about Revelation 21 and 22. There's no new temple. The Lamb is the light of thereof. There's another place, temples plays an important part of my own thinking. This is not necessarily going to be true for everyone or anything, but In grandfather's world, you have the flesh, and then the energy, and then the spirit world, the void, the creator. But grandfather called the creation the temple of creation. It's what he referred to, or the temples of creation. And he never understood the white man's religion, and as he's wandering around the Americas, in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s of last century, and sneaking up on these rural country churches and stuff, and trying to figure out this religion where the white man only comes into this little white box once a week, does some singing, some guy does some talking, then leaves. Grandfather never figured that out, man, because it's like life was worship all day long for grandfather. The creation was the temple of the creator. The creator was everywhere in all life and could be discerned. But grandfather also talked about a part of the shamanic journey, and it's the place that the evil shaman can't do certain things. In the energy fields, yes. Spirit world, some, but there's certain things they can't do. They're limited in a sense, but they definitely can't enter into the temples of the soul. Only the pure in heart enter the temples of the soul. It's a different place. If you've read Walking with Grandfather, you'll know the story from chapter 9. What's the last chapter in the book, I think, and where I am doing the little fire exercise, and I meet the colored men, the rainbow men, myself as many colors. You'll remember that story. I've since found, of course, I had a beautiful class last January, a year ago. It was a temples class that just absolutely gave me everything I needed, really, to get through this last year. But there are these temples in the soul. I have no idea how to describe them. Not like buildings, okay? And then but there are doors, ways, doors. But there are keepers in front of each one of these temples, and I happened to meet my temple keepers. I didn't know what they were at the time. I just called them colored men because they were different colors. But they were all me, just these absolutely non-fallen parts of me. They all have a function. And then there is the deepest temple of all as you move toward the light within, and that's the temple of the creator and the creation, where they're touched. And that temple keeper for me is Jesus. And so life for me is temples. Life for me is all of it's sacred, not in the icky sense of blood, but in the beautiful sense of grace. So living life in a temple is living life in this harmonic, as it were, where you don't need to make sense of things. They'll work out. They'll work out. You just need to be faithful as you're living through them, day by day, letting go of the things that you can just let go of. Just let go. Not controlling, manipulating, not manipulating. Just letting go, letting the Father do your life. There's an exercise in the awareness class in the tracker school where you're blindfolded and you go on your back in a river and you go down the river blindfolded, and the goal isn't to learn how not to fight the current, because if you fight the current, you get hurt. And you just learn to just kind of go wherever the current takes you, and eventually, even if you get in a little pool, it'll spin you out again, and you'll be back down the river or whatever. Life is like that, peeps. That's the path of discipleship. It's the path we walk with Jesus. So, all of these 7 lessons are my way of trying to help you see your way into the way the Father sees life and reality, so that your perspective is Jesus' perspective, because Jesus' perspective is the perspective of the Father, and that perspective is given to us in the Spirit. It's there. It's all there. There's one incredible way to see things through the lens of the crucified Jesus of Nazareth, risen, ascended, seated at the right hand of the Father. I don't have any idea about the coming again part. That one doesn't. I have no idea how that works out. Anyway, I'll affirm it, but I have to tell you, I don't have any idea how it'll work out. I haven't got that far. All right, so I wanted to leave you with this seventh lesson. Only those who choose to follow Jesus, only those who take the risk of discipleship, only those who say, okay, I'm going to take this step. I'm going to listen to Jesus. I am going to learn to love. I am going to be forgiving. I am going to learn to let go. I am going to be patient and be kind and generous and loyal and faithful and true and nurturing and caring. And I mean, you think of these things that are part of this large healing process that we can be and who we are in relation to each other. And you do this, you read books about how to do this, you think, you also need to take care of these other parts of your being, okay? And that's why, Lauren, I tried to do Making Peace. We did it 2 or 3 times here recently. And I know those of you that took it understand far better than those of you that have only read Walking with Grandfather, and those of you that haven't done either have no idea what I'm talking about. But how we enter these worlds, make them one with our ego, our mind, by actually shrinking our ego. See, the big self has, I'm using a metaphor here, it's totally a metaphor. Totally a metaphor. It doesn't exist in reality, it's a metaphor. To get into the self is a little tube, you know, and the ego's big, and it's too big to fit in the tube. And the only way that the ego ever is able to find its way to join its brothers and sisters is to shrink so that it fits in the tube and now can become one. This is the grain of seed falling into the ground and dying. This is the letting go of all rights. You have no rights. You're a slave. You belong to God. Christians have a funny view about rights, especially Americans, because we have God-given rights. Bullshit. Christians are those who have the God-given right to give up their rights. Give them up. Man, those of you that are still stuck in the desert of criticism, come out of it, please. You're not doing yourself any good or anyone else around you, man. We need you. We need you to begin taking those risks in your life, following Jesus best you can, always acknowledging that as beautiful as you see him, as loving and caring as you see him, you know he's far greater. And that if he's okay with it, you're just going to acknowledge that, and you're going to worship Jesus as you know him, because he's so beautiful. He'll reveal himself to you, peeps. It's what he does. It's who he is. Our God is not a hidden God. Our God is fully revealed. We know exactly what we're getting in our God in Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, Jesus washing the feet of the apostles, Deanne. That's it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, all of this, you see, that I'm doing intellectually, and that's all that's all I do is intellectual work here. Because I can't do this spiritual stuff. I mean, I suppose I could, but it would be too weird. I don't like it. I could do it. No, I don't. I never think about doing it here. Anyway, yes, giving up who you think you are. That's right. So let's talk about that for a second. Who do you think you are? You've got this construct of yourself, right? And a lot of it's informed by your culture. You know, Freud says that it's your mother and father that did this to you, and so-and-so said it's this, and you've got these environmental influences and this knowledge about your life, but you got to remember you also got selective memory, people, man. You're remembering things the way you You A, want to remember them, and B, the way that those memories were formed in various types of trauma and this and that and the other, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And then you've got an interpretation of all that. My life sucks. My life was crap. I was poor. I was such and such a race. I was such and such a... And you've got this whole interpretation of it. That's still Adamic. That's all Adamic. You know, you spend your whole life making excuses for yourself. I was abused. I was neglected. I was this. I was that. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to eat a worm, and you end up becoming a school shooter or something. I mean, for crying out loud, we've created a society that loathes this kind of, the results of this kind of thinking, but we practically export it to the world, and we consume it daily. Who you think you are is not who you are. That's why Paul says it is better to be known by God. God knows who you are. And the Father will make sense of your life for you. But you have to follow Jesus in order for that to happen. Life is lived forwards. You're following Jesus forwards. And after you follow Jesus forwards for a while, then you turn around, you look back, and you go, oh, there you were. Oh, there you were. Oh, there you were. Oh, I get that. Oh, that makes sense. But it takes time. Yes, learning to be humble and thankful for what you have. See what Deanne's, she's making points here so that I'll just preach on them. The gratitude part's the essential part. That's Eucharist. Eucharistia is the Greek term Thanksgiving. Again, Eucharistic attitude. As Karl Barth so finally said, charis evokes chara and Eucharistia. Grace evokes joy and gratitude. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to let that be the lesson for today. Now, I'm going to take a week off from videoing here. One of the things I need to do, I've got work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the restaurant, and I've got some preaching piece work here I have to finish up. But I also want to, I'll need to take a good 15 hours or so to lay out the notes in detail for the next section, which where I'm framing the historical, my historical understanding of the early church, the apostolic church, probably through the mid-second century. In this next section, it's 10 lessons. The next section is 10 lessons. But there we're going to lay out the frame. And again, it's an intellectual journey, but life is far more than that. So I hope you'll take far more than that out of what I'm doing. All right. Peace and love, everybody. Hey, Deanne, thanks for joining me. And I'll look forward to chatting with you all again soon. Okay? Cheers.